Welcome to From College to College. This podcast explores innovative teaching, learning, and quality in further education and community college, with lessons from both sides of the pond. Whether you're a lecturer, a leader, or a lifelong learner, this is your conversation. I'm Dr. Lauran Kerr-Heraly. I'm American, I'm British, and I've been involved in college education for over 20 years. Each episode, I share my own experiences as a history professor, innovation fellow, and quality lead. I also sit down with amazing college professionals from the UK and the US to highlight incredible practice in the college sector. We'll talk about what's working and why, and give you creative ideas to employ on your campus straight away. Let's get started. How many times have you planned a truly engaging lesson and then defaulted to a 45-minute lecture because it was just easier? I've certainly experienced burnout from trying to design perfect active learning experiences. So today I'm going to show you how and why active learning doesn't need to be complicated and how small changes can dramatically shift student engagement. One of the most powerful and misunderstood ideas in teaching is active learning. So, quick definition of that: active learning is a lot about getting students involved and active. So, just like it says on the tin, lots of discussion, problem solving, collaboration, hands on application, things like that. Getting students to design learning instead of passively taking it in. It's the contrast to passive learning, actually, because passive learning is lecture heavy, it's worksheet driven, and there's low student interaction. So, the core benefits of active learning is that it encourages critical thinking, it encourages collaboration, the human element of working with other people, sharing ideas, leads to deeper understanding because, again, along with the critical thinking, we want them to be able to retain and understand on a deep level what they're learning. So, in community colleges, in further education colleges, we have diverse learners from every possible background, whether that's skill or upbringing or area or whatever. And that means that they have varied prior attainment. So, as we're helping them develop their skills to maybe bring them up to speed or encourage them further, and also develop employability skills, active learning is really important because it meets the needs of all of our learners. It's more adaptive than simply passive learning as well, passive teaching. Active learning isn't about doing more, it's about students doing more of the thinking and the learning. So, one of the big myths again about active learning is that it has to be complex, that you've got to design incredible, engaging lessons and you have to take hours and hours to plan them. But the reality is, one of the big myths about active learning is that it takes a lot of time on the instructor side. Planning active learning can feel time intensive and difficult. One thing I want to address about active learning is that it can be difficult for us as instructors to sort of give up our power, as it were. Part of the reason I love teaching history is because there's so many great stories. So it might be that I have to give up a few anecdotes in order to have more active learning. Or I might think, well, I have a PhD in this subject. I know more than them. So I should just deliver a really great lecture. And perhaps in some environments, that's fine, but not in a community college and not in a further education college. That's not our environment, it's not our learners, and it's not our goal of education. So while you might feel like you're giving something up, hopefully you're gaining a lot more. Another big myth about active learning is that it has to be really complex. A reality is that planning active learning can feel time intensive and difficult, but it doesn't actually require a total overhaul. At one point, I worked on a project that was helping professors to add in more active learning, and our approach was to encourage everyone to change one thing, to try one new strategy, which is what you keep hearing me talk about with the ripple effect of innovation. And you start small, but it builds from there. So, active learning doesn't require an overhaul, but it does require a shift in mindset and some small changes. This is a concept that I call simple swaps instead of total redesigns. And we can think about what are some small ways we can change so that learners are more active, so that we learn how to plan and design these activities without feeling like it's eating half of our week. A question to ask yourself is, where are you overcomplicating engagement in your lessons right now? Sometimes I'll go into a lesson in my role as quality and innovation lead, and I'm doing a learning walk and I'm seeing really amazing things happen, but sometimes they're quite overcomplicated and the directions are hard to follow. And it's because the instructor is trying really hard, but maybe simplifying that activity is actually going to get them more active. So there's a sort of balance to reach here. So let's move from theory to practice. And I'm going to give you 5 swaps that you can try. The first one is to go from a long lecture to chunking that lecture. I never lecture more than 10 minutes, and that would be the absolute max. Most of the time, it's more like 5 to 7 minutes. And even within that, I'm thinking of ways that I can get them actively engaged. Think about maybe you're planning a 30-minute lecture, but how can you change this to a 5 to 10 minute chunk of a lecture and add in some discussion? Maybe you talk to them for 5 minutes. Maybe they give you feedback for 5 minutes. You go back to talking for 5 minutes, etc. So you're still accomplishing the same thing, but you're getting their feedback. You're having them be actively listening and then showing you how they're listening. There are multiple ways you can do this. So the benefits of this is that there's increased attention because they're actively listening. They know that they are going to have to feed back to you. And for yourself, you get immediate feedback on the learner's understanding. So an example might be in health and social care or nursing. Maybe you give them a mini input, tell a story about a scenario from industry experience, and then you give them a chance to discuss how they would react in that scenario, what would be the appropriate responses and the correct steps to take if they were faced with the same sort of thing. Another one is worksheets. One way you can swap that out is still do the worksheets, but have them in problem solving stations. So instead of handing out a worksheet to everyone in the room and having them sit there, you can have these spread around the room. An example of this is when I'm having students analyze primary sources in my history class. I might have 6 sources around the room, and they have to rotate and show that they understand different sources, but it gets them out of their seats, it gets them talking to each other, and it's just a change. So the benefits are movement, really important that they don't have to sit in a chair for too long. I don't want to sit in a chair for an hour, so I'm not going to make them do that. And you can have specific guidelines for this too, because if you do have some learners who you're like, no, I don't want them out of their seats because they'll start throwing water bottles or something, then it's sort of building up respectful guidelines and practicing those before you do these kind of activities. Another benefit is collaboration, and another benefit is engagement. That they have to get up and around and they have to see different things. They have to read different sources. They have to work through different problems, etc. So you don't have to reinvent what you already have. If you have a worksheet that you know that they need to work through for math, for example, then if it's got 12 problems on it, split it up into 3 problems and post those around the room. There are other ways you can do this. One other active learning swap I like to do is having students look at each other's work. So, yes, we have to assess them. Yes, we need to give them feedback. That's very important. But it can also be helpful, particularly on a formative assessment within a classroom, to instead of being the one to lead the review, lead the revision section of the class, to offer structured peer feedback. This reduces your workload because they're telling each other, well, this is what you did well, this is what you could work on better before they give you their final drafts or even the next draft. But it also deepens learner understanding because then they're starting to, for example, when I do this with rough drafts of essays, then I'll have them look at a rubric and then have each other compare what they've done to the rubric. So it also builds feedback literacy from a college lens. This is key for vocational progression as well as HE progression. So that's going to be important as well. Another simple swap is teacher input. Instead of doing that and relying so much on it, that we have the student teaching. So the swap would be instead of instructor-led delivery to student-created presentations. I had a student this year who, in college, this is the first time she's ever given a presentation. It's really important that we help them with this skill, and that can be anything from the old standard, they create a PowerPoint and talk to you about a topic, or it can be sort of 2-minute speeches, it can be something they've created that they're explaining. There's a lot of ways that we can help them with this. So, instead of at the end of the year, there's a presentation to count as some kind of exam grade, we can do this throughout the year and we can say, on week 3, you guys are each going to do a 2-minute presentation about a topic that you've researched, or you're going to tell us something about the textbook passage that you read in 3 minutes. You're starting that from the beginning of the year, building it up. The benefit of this is that it's a higher order thinking. This is the creation level of Bloom's taxonomy. If you're not familiar with Bloom's taxonomy, it is a pyramid of critical thinking, and I'll link it in the show notes because it's really helpful, particularly for creating learning objectives and helping determine what you want them to accomplish and learn. Basically, if they can teach it, they can understand it. So the learning is going to increase if they have to create and present. Another active swap, instead of giving a study guide, go to game-based review. There's a reason they love games so much. They are competitive, they're fun, and instead of passive revision of write down all this stuff on flashcards, turn it into an interactive game. An instructor just told me the other day they had gotten a load of game buzzers like you see on a game show, and the students love them. These are college students, right? This doesn't have to be an elementary school thing, a primary school thing, but The more active you can get them, the better. And games are a great way to do that. One of my favorites is around the world because it gets people out of their chairs. You have two learners stand up, you ask them a question. Whoever answers first goes to the next chair and then faces off against the next student. And whoever has gone around the room the most will win. So that's just a fun way to get them out of their seats, get them invested in trying to remember what they've learned. This not only increases participation, but it also can increase energy. Sometimes, particularly in further education, we might have groups for 7 hours a day. So it's breaking up those days and thinking about how we can give them some energy, particularly in the late afternoon. This works brilliantly with mixed attainment groups. And if you have one person, one learner who always likes to shout the answer and always buzzes in first or whatnot, you can have them be the scorekeeper or give them another role where they're actively engaged, but they're not sort of taking over everything. Some of the common pitfalls of active learning could be over planning. It also could be trying to gamify everything. Now, you do have to talk to them and you do have to give them instructor input. So it can't all be on them. It can't all be a game. Sometimes they have to do boring things, but it is possible to sort of weave these things through, right? You might also lose the learning focus if you're trying to get them too active. I remember a long time ago, a history instructor spent like 2 days teaching students how to make cornbread, and there was a really tentative link between enslavement in the US South and using corn. I don't know. But what they remembered is making cornbread. They didn't actually learn anything about the ecology and the agriculture of the region and how that connected to enslavement. So you need to make sure that you have your learning objectives from the start and that you can accomplish them through the active learning that you're devising. So start small. One swap per week, one swap per lesson. Think about ways you can change it up and see how it works, test it, and then start doing more. Again, keep the objective central, whatever your learning objectives are, backwards plan from there, and make some active learning activities. And build routines as well. If the buzzers are going to be an important part of your revision, you could bring them out every 3 weeks or something like that. So they know this is where the buzzers live, this is how we organize them, this is where we put them back, things like that. So you're not doing it all the time because then it would get boring, but they know how to use them. After you've tried your simple swap in an upcoming lesson, reflect on what changed in student engagement. And I'd love for you to tell me how that goes. My contact information is in the show notes. Active learning isn't about doing more, it's about designing moments where students do the work of learning.
Thanks for listening to From College to College. If you found today's episode valuable, please subscribe. To get my free newsletter and access all resources mentioned today, head to the show notes. You can also visit my website to learn more about speaking engagements, coaching, and executive function support. And if you're enjoying the show, please take a moment to rate and review. This makes a huge difference in helping others discover it. Cheers, y'all!